is eigenlijk heel simpel.
Waarschijnlijk de groene. Geef dat trouwens als ik mijn papier neerleg.
Ja, die heb ik.
Die staat nog niet aan.
Sta ik aan een loop, ja.
Maar groen en geel en rood is terug.
Ja.
Ja, oké.
Maar het is wel zo, zoals nu, je kunt hebben.
Ah,
maar
oké.
je zet de laatste, dus geen probleem. Als je de volgende spreekt, als jij vragen om te antwoorden zijn, dan komt normaal al de volgende erop, dus dan gaat het.
Moet het terug. Ah, ik wist niet dat dat hier kon.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. My name is Koen Schelkens from Belnet, and I'm chair for this session about collaboration tools and user experience. This session will highlight three examples of how the user and user experience can be taken in account within an NNRN research networking context, and how user experience can be measured and qualified. First of all, we have Dr. Jorge Sanchez, who will share his ideas with us on how the implementation of a research and educational development index, known as READY, can be helpful for measuring and understanding the digital divide within an environment. Secondly, we have Dimitris Daskopoulos, who will show us how reliable and sustainable video conferencing and voice over IP collaboration tools are offered to the international community thanks to the EduConf project. And finally, we have Catherine Demoor, who will present us the concept of quality of experience, or QoE, and how QoE can be measured accurately. Just before the start, please mind that your mobile phones are switched off, and don't forget to fill in your evaluation form after the session. Thank you very much. Now I would like to call Mr. Jorge Sanchez to the floor. Mr. Sanchez holds a PhD in electrical and computer engineering and has a long career as advisor and project manager within telecommunications, internet, and research. Jorge Sanchez will share his views on the Research and Education Development Index. Thank you.
For the changing the slides, is this one? Okay. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you, with this community that I have been working from 2002 to 2006. Actually, the gentleman at the back, Vasilis, gave me the opportunity to come and work with the Greek Research and Education Network, GRNet, in a period that we had the development of the regional networks, the regions around Europe, and a very exciting moment to work in the Balkans, in the Mediterranean, in Eastern Europe, in assisting those countries to establish an NREN, to establish a network, to put the first dark fiber. Really very exciting moments. My presentation will try to answer the question whether we are ready. Ready to offer to the community that we serve a network that will enable their research in the European research area. And going to the end, as you will see, this is a non-technical presentation. I hope that you will take home that we are still not ready, and our research community still needs a lot, and hopefully with the technical work we will be able to offer them a better networking environment. This work is part of the EARNEST study, the study that was done in the framework of ZEAN2, looking ahead into the research and networking environment 5-10 years from now. So what we wanted to do is to move one step ahead from the previous study done in the framework of ZEAN1, and to look into a way to quantify and measure the digital divide, or if you wish, the digital opportunity. That is defined as the uneven distribution, difference or gap in regular and effective access to and usage of digital resources and technologies. The study was focused to the perceived digital divide for the end user. So whatever we will see is what the end user sees actually for him. That digital divide, as you know, is due either to infrastructural, but also social, economic, educational, regulatory, and other causes. And it can be, it includes, but is not limited to the unavailability, difficulty in accessing, even unawareness in some cases, of the availability and capacity and capabilities or lack of understanding of how to access and use resources, etc., etc. Obviously, the conclusions that we made can be also used to deduct information and results for the organizations, computer, and in general geographic areas that are attached to the research and education networks. And we didn't start from zero. We tried to use the international experience in this area, and the international experience says that in order to really measure a very complex, if you wish, item concept, you need to work on something that we call a composite index. In our everyday life, we use a lot of composite indexes. One of them is the inflation rate. You probably know that the inflation rate doesn't count all the increases in the value of all the items, but it takes a kind of a set of items, and based on that, it calculates the increase. Another one is from the stock markets. You probably know that when in the news in the evening you have the increase or whatever of the stock in France or in the Netherlands, etc. This doesn't count all the stocks, but it takes some of them. So it takes, for example, the FTSE takes the 100 stocks, and based on that it creates the index. Now, specifically in the area of the digital divide, there are many indexes, as you can see here. For example, the Digital Opportunity Index, created by the ITU, and many, many others. What I want to show in this is that all those indexes, since they are composite, they use a lot of measures. So, from the bibliography, we have that we have indexes that use from 8 up to 48. The trend, as you can also understand, is to use as less as possible of them in order to get your results, so to ease the process of collecting the data, etc., etc. Now, another trend is that they try also to have some of those indexes in groups, so that those groups can expose to you also some other very interesting things. For example, in the Digital Opportunity Index, we have 3 clusters of measures, one that shows you the infrastructure, another one that shows you the utilization, another one that shows you the opportunity in the digital divide. What actually those rankings and indexes show to you is, first of all, a ranking of countries. Second, they show you also a map, so you can get a fast view of the situation. And as I said before, you have some indexes in between of the groupings you want. The most important thing of that is to see what is happening in the internal indexes in relation to the composite index. Of course, in the newspapers, the first, and you probably have in the news every month or so, that in that index my country went up 2 positions, or my country went down 10 positions, or whatever. And why the index is important? It's very important because based on that, a policy maker, a decision maker, can see whether a project, an action, a policy was good for my country or not. Or he can see whether in which area, for example, in utilization, so my people were able to use or not the infrastructure, or whether the infrastructure is bad or not. So he can also take some interesting outcome of whether he needs to improve the policy. Now, this is the framework that we set in order to have an index for the NRN community. And first of all, we wanted to cover as much countries as possible, because in this way you can actually really see the situation not only in Europe but also worldwide. Second, we wanted a modular structure, very similar to what I presented before, a modular structure that can allow groupings, logical classifications, clustering, that can expose special interest things. Third, to have a very straightforward methodology. The raw ingredients, so the data, are separate indicators that can be measured easily. This is one of the most difficult things when you have a composite index. That they can also be convoluted in a single value. Then we have objective criteria for the selection of the indicators. Those indicators, as much as possible, to be standardized. We don't want to create a new one, so let's use whatever is there. And last but not least, we want all those indicators and the index to capture both the causes as well as the effects of the digital divide. So as it regards the first thing, we wanted to look into as many countries as possible. The original number of countries we wanted to measure is around 59. But at the end, we were not able to collect data for two countries or territories, is Libya and Palestine. So for those countries, unfortunately, many of the data is missing. Further on, for some of the countries here, some of the data is not available. So we had to go back and forth with organizations or the DNRs in order to collect the data. And in some cases, of course, those values cannot be really robust. So in order to build the structure that we wanted, we wanted to build this composite index, and we have 5 subcomponents. One of the components is the infrastructure component. So how capable is the network we have built? Second, the usage. So how much the network is used? Third, the affordability. So do we have the means to build a good network? The knowledge. Do we have the capacity to use the network? And last, the quality. How robust is the network we built? So trying to answer those questions with measures that we can get. As it regards the infrastructure, we want to actually answer the question with the indexes that can answer the question on the network capacity. Okay? Then for the usage, the resources utilization, etc., etc. Just to give you an example of the infrastructure that actually is the one that you are closest to, the capacity of a network, of any network, is the capacity of the core network, if you can answer that. Then the capacity of the connectivity to the global internet. And then is the capacity of accessing your actual end users. All those data is available actually through the Terena compendium. So you can see here the external connectivity of the NRNs with peerings and without peerings. And you can get here the core capacity of the networks, etc., etc. Now, since I said that we want to see the perceived digital divide for the users, all those have been converted into a per-user basis. And here you see some of the indexes that we can convolute to answer the question on the how capable is my network. So we have from the Terena compendium the external connectivity with peerings and without peerings. We have the core network size, the core network capacity, and the access network capacity. Now, this is the whole and global picture for the index. So for each one of them, we try to answer the question with that, and those are the indicators that we finally used. Now, when we started the activity, we were hoping to have also a possibility to answer the last one. So how my network is performing. Unfortunately, and I still believe this is the case today, there is no single way, at least even in the XEAN2 network, to measure RTT, jitter, throughput, and reachability, and losses, and similar values, actually what is happening now for all the NRNs, and in a single link. At least this was not possible when we were doing the work. So this is an area that we need to improve a lot and to have a single way to measure all these values. Now, let's start with some of the findings. So taking the value of the total capacity of the external link, that is the, as I said before, indicative of the nominal ability of the NRN to carry traffic to the global internet, we have that more than 2 orders of magnitude disparity exists between EU member states. Let me tell you a little bit about the colors here. Blue are the EU member states. In green are the Balkan countries. In black, the Mediterranean countries. In orange are the Eastern European countries, not member states. And in yellow are ASEAN, 2 partners, but not EU member states. So, for example, the case of Switzerland, Norway, Russia, etc. Now, if we look between the EU member states and the neighboring countries, the difference is even greater, as you can understand. Now, looking now into the perceived digital divide for the end users, we have now a bigger digital divide. First of all, in this specific index, the 2 countries that are first is Slovakia, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, then Switzerland, Sweden, etc., etc. Now, in this one, Slovakia and the Netherlands, in average, score a value of 40 kilobits per second, in average. The result is that we have more than 3 orders of magnitude disparity between EU member states. That means between Slovakia and the Netherlands, that more or less the same, to Bulgaria, that are at the end, they are the blue one. And obviously, if we look into situations like Syria, Uzbekistan, etc., the picture is even worse. Now, very interesting to say here that the new EU member states, the 10 EU member states, so before Romania and Bulgaria, though that region outperforms by a factor of 2 any other average, including the ASEAN, the previous European member state, etc. And as we can also entail from that, the trailing end of the plot, the end range of that plot, is certain, and I guess some of you have been in countries like Uzbekistan, Syria, or even in the eastern part of Turkey or Georgia or Armenia, those countries and the research in those countries, they don't have any possibility to access cutting-edge research and education networking applications. Looking now into the overall index that is answering the question of the NRN infrastructure index, so external connectivity, core network size, core network capacity, access network capacity. Now, so the whole picture, we have here that in Europe, in the EU member states, we have a 2 orders of magnitude difference, 4 orders of magnitude between Syria and the Netherlands, and in comparing the average of ASEAN 2, Balkan, and the Mediterranean, you see here the differences. This is now the overall picture. So all the values together in the index. This is the map. This is the ranking. So in the first 10 places of the ranking, we have the Netherlands, Iceland, Sweden, Slovakia, Norway, Hungary, Slovakia, Switzerland, following by the others. And in the very end, we have there Romania and Bulgaria, the 2 new member states. It's very interesting to see also that map there. So that map I took from a presentation of Vasilis again. You see there the links, the 10 gigabit links that are today or probably 3 or 4 months before in Europe. And it's interesting to see that there is a very big concentration of those in the Netherlands, it's obvious. A big concentration in the eastern, the new member states, in Sweden, you see that there. And very almost blank in some countries like Austria, like France, like Spain, like Italy. So actually from just plotting the actual situation of the network, we see there that there is a lot of work still to be done. Now, some byproducts of the overall study. First of all, many say that we can build a network if we have a lot of money, so a very good budget. And we try to plot that in that graph there on the top left. So the red versus the GDP per capita. And actually you see that in a normalized version of the graph, most of the countries are around the 45 degrees line. Okay, so that's what we would expect. But we have 2 regions that are far out of the 45 degrees line. And that region includes, in the lower part, is the new member state. So what is happening there, with less budget, with less funding for the NRN and overall for the economy, they are performing very well in building a very good network. Another case is the countries in the Nordic countries. So we have there Sweden, Finland, etc., that also, for those countries, as we all know, they have as a priority to have a very good educational system and a research system. So interesting to say that. Then another graph very interesting, and I think I have to stop, is the ready versus the internet tariff. So the internet tariff is one of the best indicators of the competition of the market in a country. That value is the one that is most, if you wish, related to the ready. So very big relation there, as you can see in the graph. It's interesting to say that in Armenia, we have 100 times more you pay for the internet than, for example, in the Netherlands. 100 times more. So as a result of that, the policymakers have really to work on opening the competition of the market. Another very interesting graph for you, for the technical people, is this one. So we try to measure the evolution, the performance of the commercial network versus the one of the NRN. And as we can all expect, most of the NRNs are above the 45 degrees line. But unfortunately, there are also some NRNs that are below the line. What does it mean? That in those countries, the commercial internet is evolving faster, better if you wish, at least with what we measure, to the NRN. And this is something to take care, an alarming signal, that those NRNs, and all the NRNs of course, they have to work harder to offer really state-of-the-art network services to the community. So, as some of the results of the study, how much time is that? 1 minute? Okay. So, first of all, we have noticed, and this was really obvious from the study, that all the projects at the level of the European Union that work on building networking, both in Europe, within Europe, and in the regions neighboring us, have helped really to ease the digital divide. And therefore, the recommendation is that those projects, those regional projects, for example, in the Balkans, in the Mediterranean, etc., that are very important for Europe, because we need to also assist those countries to keep their brains in working in those countries. Those projects have to continue, but at this time they have to continue in a way that we really find a champion there, and we work more on the sustainability, something that didn't happen in the first phase of those. Second, that the NRNs have to now to get an institutional role. In most of the cases of the NRNs, well, not most of the cases, but many of the cases, the NRNs work on a project basis. So they have a budget for 1 year, for 2 years maximum. Only in a few cases they have a budget for more than that. And this really destroys the capacity of building a very good network. So they have to get an institutional role, and they have to get a budget that is for a bigger period of time. Third, from the graph that I presented, the governments have to work more on building a predictable, fair competition and really deregulated telecommunication market that, as have been exposed by the study, is the thing that affects more the development of the NRN in a country. Then all the programs, funding available in Europe at the moment in many cases is split among many programs, and those programs have somehow to be combined to have a common scope, especially in this domain. So for the areas that we have seen that there is a huge digital divide, we need to have a kind of a e-RED initiative that really brings together all the activities towards solving this issue. Number 6, education and training. In many cases, we've seen that users don't know how to use the network and how to use the services, and that's why we see that the network is unutilized. And I have seen that also in the framework of Terena, of ZEANT, etc. This is now one of the interesting and important things for the future, that we have to put more emphasis on education and training. And last but not least, as we have shown as a European Union, really a paradigm of bringing together all of the ideas, we need really a declaration of solidarity for diminishing the digital divide, both at the NRL level, at the policy level, at the government level. So this work, we hope that will continue. We will try to measure again the same thing for the following years. From the graph that I showed you for the 10 gigabits, for example, we have seen a tremendous improvement in the ranking, for example, for one country, the one that I'm coming from Greece, that suddenly managed to get dark fiber from the telecom operator, and now they have 5,000 kilometers of dark fiber, therefore really developing and improving the capacity and the services offered to the community there. So having said that, I would like to thank you for the Terena Compendium team, the Ernest panel members, and the Geographic Issue Study Board of Ernest, and of course the data that we gather from the international organizations for developing the REDI index. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Are there any questions for Mr. Sanchez? Yes.
Thank you very much, Jorge. It's a while since I've seen your presentation on this, and I think it's developed a lot, and it's very interesting. Can you hear me? It's on? Oh, yeah. What I wanted to say was that it seems that this has moved from being a geographic issue to being one dependent on a lot of other factors which you've measured. And I think that's good, because there's very little we can do about geography, but we can do something about the other things. Was that an objective of yours to identify real factors, economic and technical factors, which we can address, rather than saying, well, this is geography and there's nothing we can do about it?
Well, we started, I would say, with a rather small objective in the start of the study, but as it progressed, we started to build up more and more. This study was actually combined with another study that was run by Dai Davis, as you know, and a study that really identified that apart from the overall digital divide and many of the causes that we have identified, there is also a real geographic divide, and you probably know some of the factors. Just to tell you a little bit about geography, and I think that Karel actually mentioned that first, I heard from him. In the United States, we had the situation where the two ends of the country really were had more activity for various reasons. Okay? In Europe, we have an opposite situation where a lot of concentration of activity is happening in the center. So London, Brussels, Amsterdam, Paris, Frankfurt, etc. That situation is really causing a big problem for the countries that are in the edge. And for this to be solved, because we cannot move population around, we cannot move activities around, there is a need for a kind of some incentives in this respect. And as I said before, we need in each country champions. We need the people that understand how to get access to the infrastructure, to build the services, to train the people, like what has happened in some of the cases, like in Portugal, that they put a lot of effort to get this dark fiber from the north to the south through the railways. Or what happened in, as I said, in Greece, that suddenly from a very bad situation and position now we have a very good network. Or what happened in the eastern countries, in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, that are now ranked in the first 5 positions. What happened there? With the needs of those countries to join fast the European Commission, they opened the market. That opening actually assisted those countries. And this is a very good example for if you wish, the older European member states, like France, Italy, and Spain, that they have to put more effort and more emphasis to really allow the researchers in those countries to join the European research area with equal opportunity. Because we all know that accessing the network, accessing the services is really offering a lot to our countries. And in Ireland, you have proved that by using in the best possible way European funding, if you wish, structural funds, you have managed to get from a 60% average in GDP per capita to a 140, something like that. So it's obvious that the human capital is the one that can bring the change.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one last question?
I'm not sure if that works. I saw one slide that was talking about bit rates of the range of 40 kilobits per second.
Yes.
And my question is, why this number so low?
This is an average, so you shouldn't take the number per se. Obviously, in countries like the Netherlands and Slovakia, there are users that can get access of 1 gigabit and 40 gigabits whenever they want. But this is a calculation of an average, just to really get a value that give us a feeling of the actual situation. So what would have happened is that if all users of the National Research Education were connected at the same time on the network, so this could be the average value that they will get, okay? But this is obviously not the case, and therefore there are end users that get better values. The important thing is to get the differences between, these 40 kilobits to the 0.1 bit per second that we get in some countries.
It's more proportion of the population and the available total bandwidth, not an indication of the performance of the network.
No. This is an indication of what I said. So if you divide the capacity in either the international link or the network or the access of all the universities with the population that are using that network, so researchers and students and professors, you get this average value. But I said you get that value only if all of them were connected at the same time, okay? And really doing a continuous, if you wish, FTP or whatever.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dimitris Daskopoulos. Dimitris holds a master in computer engineering and works as the network manager for the University of Thessaloniki since 1995. And he will present us his findings with the EduConf project. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I work for the University of Thessaloniki, but for this specific project, I represent GRNet, of whose teams I'm proud to work with. I'm actually here on behalf of the SA6 service activity group of GEANT, and it's not the findings that I will present, it's more the planning stage of this very new and very young activity. Actually, it's the youngest one of all GEANT activities. So the name is EduConf, and I will try to present the concept of how we would like to see this service activity being deployed to help and make video conferencing, which we all have experienced as being something very successful in times and troublesome at other times, to see how we can make this more a sustainable and reliable activity for the users. So these will be the contents of the presentation. It's not technical at all. I would like to have some indication of how many of you are active users of video conferencing services and what type, because I'd like to explain exactly what video conferencing services we're targeting it at in SA6. So there will be some background information about the community that I come from, that of VC administrators of the NRENs and the problems we've faced in the past. Then I'd like to point out to how EduConf is going to address those problems, with what objectives and with what tools, and a little bit of the roadmap for the future. So the community that I come from is that of the VC administrators, of the MCU administrators as they're called, because of these devices that we use for multi-point video conferencing, which means that we're focusing on a group of multi-party video conferencing sessions, usually of the international community of the academic and research networks. So our meetings, our VC sessions usually involve endpoints from a number of countries, people collaborating on a project, a research project, most of the time being hosted on MCU, video conferencing services, of some other organization other than their own. Oops. And what we end up doing in our daily life, well, it's only part of our work, but as VC administrators, we end up supporting the actual end users that walk up to an endpoint, which is a specialized device, or at least it used to be up until very recently. Nowadays, desktop software-only solutions are springing up, supporting those end users into getting a more reliable and pleasant experience with those VC sessions. So what we see in international meetings of this type for research around Terena groups, task forces, or GIANT, we see varied groups of end users that are not really technically minded or not really VC experienced necessarily, that want to use the resources of their organization, an endpoint or a room system, and they usually walk into that room with somebody else, if they're lucky, somebody that is the VC administrator of the local organization. And if they want to host a meeting that involves other end users from other organizations, they have to do this by organizing it by email and by having one organization hosting this event for all the different users. So that introduces the problem. If you are to be hosted on somebody else's service, then you have to become known to this service, and it may be a very well-developed service that's used locally in some NREN, but if you have to jump in as a guest on that service, you immediately began facing problems like how do I get to the online directions if they're in another language, or how do I get authentication authorization for using that service? This type of service right now, for most NRENs that are very active in this field, is based on the H323 protocol. And what we end up using for interconnection between our services is the GDS, the Global Dialing Scheme, which is a simple way of dialing each other's services without needing to know the IP address of the other endpoint. Okay, so we've developed a hierarchy of world gatekeepers that know how to handle the international dial plan for calling each other MCU services and even VoIP services. So this is where VoIP and VC come together under this one dialing scheme. ENAM is emerging, and we've done a lot of work outside GN2 in replacing or at least having an alternative to the GDS dialing schema, so we can have a more reliable mechanism of calling each other between the national services. So that comes into the picture as well. There has been a preparatory study of the problems that VC administrators and end users, their end users, are facing, and that was done as part of the TFVSS task force of Terena, which came up with the following findings. The coordination between MCU and VC administrators was hard, very hard. It was hard to even know who was responsible for the endpoint that was having trouble. It was hard to get him to become involved with helping out in this particular situation that their help was needed. And when they actually did, it was very hard for them to troubleshoot what was going on, because there was no outside monitoring solution to monitor multi-domain, the connectivity between the different services of the different countries. And another issue that was important was if you wanted to schedule a meeting with somebody on some other organization, the most obvious question is, do they have the capability of participating in this MCU session? Do they have the equipment? Do they have local support? Do they have a room that they walk into? Is this service being advertised? So all this information might have been known for some organizations, but not widely available. And what was typical was to volunteer, as I said before, volunteer national MCU services to groups that wanted to have such meetings. So they were outside hosted by outside third parties. So what is EduConf? EduConf started from this same community of VC administrators that wanted to see these problems being addressed. And through the GN2 framework, we put together a new service activity. It's very young, as I said. It's been running for less than a year, and it's in the planning phase, to address the previous problems. We're actually extending some of the now being deployed GN services like EduRoam and PERT and PerfSonar and the AI framework, the EduGain framework. So all of these come into our planning for being used with our service, but our service is probably the one that sits higher up on the OSI stack. And we're hoping we can leverage all of the environment that's available to us through the GN2 project, and especially the network, QoS and AI, and especially people. We're hoping to involve as many of the VC administrators of other countries that have not been active in our discussions to this project. So what are the objectives? We want to coordinate support and eventually be able to effectively treat the reporting of trouble during those VC sessions, even before those sessions are established, and while the problems are there. We want to have to set up a service for monitoring connectivity between national services and the ability to reach other countries. We'd like to make the information about availability of the services in all the countries available to the end user, and special information about the troubleshooting to VC administrators. So there are two levels to this service, that the VC administrators themselves would have the ability to tap into private information about who is responsible for that endpoint or that MCU on the other side of Europe, and how do I get in touch with them, what IP addresses are they using, and how can I troubleshoot the problem. We would also act as disseminators for the know-how of setting up such services at the local level. We see quite a few countries that are not being involved in these services, and we see the potential for helping them out with tools and services that they can deploy for their end users. And somewhere along the line of the development of SA6, we see the possible deployment of a central MCU resource, but this is not really the core issue of our work. So our project details, the name came in very easily after EduRoam was a natural choice. Our partners, meaning those that develop the services, are currently the ones listed here. Most of them were very active in video conferencing, and it was basically people who wanted to be part of the solution. But that doesn't mean that we're limited to interworking with just these NRENs. The project is open to any NREN or organization interested in participating for coordinating their services with EduConf. It's a budgeted effort. It's only for the very last portion of GN2, which will barely give us time to deploy pilot phase services. And so far, we've just been through the work item 1, which is the design phase of the project. And we're hoping to finish GN2 with the pilot phase of the following services. The setup of the multi-domain monitoring framework, a directory of deployments, which will be federated in the sense that the organizations and the NRNs themselves are going to publish data about the deployments, like dial plans, what's reachable and what's not, MCU services that are offered. We will provide support services through the means of mailing lists of experts, expert VC admins that can target problems at the international level. And we would like to hope that national and organizational VC administrators are going to participate in this effort. And possibly provide MCU central resources. So the monitoring platform. We thought long and hard about how we could use, start with PerfSonar, already deployed services, and how that might help with our monitoring nodes. We chose the easier way of deploying it through Nagios, which would simplify and quicken the process for us. What we want to do is deploy listening and calling services at each of the participating countries, not just the project participants, but all the countries that are interested in participating, and develop a framework to send results back to. And the results are going to be available in this matrix-style format that would make connectivity obvious to anybody who's troubleshooting and even to end users themselves. Through the web interface, obviously. This is a diagram of the architecture of the monitoring platform that we're thinking of deploying. The red boxes are the gatekeepers, the national gatekeepers of the participating NRENs. The actual testers, the ones that are going to be trying multiple calls to multiple different destinations and receiving calls from others, are the blue ones. And the yellow box is the reporting, so the service that will be gathering all the statistics and making it available through a database and a web interface. As for the directory, we try to place the information of, or the handling of the information with the local administrator of the NREN, so they can make any new versions or updates to their information as readily as possible, as easily as possible for them. So the directory collection is going to be done from publishing points that the NRENs control. And what will be the information? The information that we want to gather is something about their infrastructure, which usually VC admins are ready to share with other administrators, like what gatekeepers they use, what MCUs, and this is going to be hidden from the end user, but it's going to help greatly with troubleshooting. Then the dial plan and the calling methods, that's something that can certainly help the administrator, but it's even more useful for the end user, who will know how to call other countries, what numbers are reachable, if they can reach the PBX of the institution or not, through the same infrastructure, and how to get access to open resources that NRENs are willing to share with other NRENs, like MCUs, as they do now. Only this is going to be published now. Contact information about getting in touch with responsible admin people, both at the infrastructure level and at the endpoint level, which is what we're really interested in and hoping we'll be able to help with the end users by making known to them where and what endpoints are available in which institutions across Europe. So we're hoping that this wide publication, wide availability of data about VC endpoints and where they're available in Europe will make the use even higher, and it will help administrators themselves coordinate in solving problems even on a peer-to-peer level. So obviously this directory is going to have some public and some private data. Public in the sense that it will be available over the web to any interested end user. Private in the sense that it will be, some of it will kept secret and known just to VC administrators and not to the wide public, because they might be considered sensitive information about deployment infrastructure. The tools are all deployed over the web. And to give you a simple example of a prototype that was built by Fabio from Switch, it's a simple Geo API where we're hoping all deployments will be able to be easily seen by interested parties. They could zoom in on cities and institutions and find out their deployments, find out how to call them, all the different methods that are available to call them, whether it's enum or GDS or common numbers or alternative ISN type of solutions. So this is a very good tool for the end user to reach communities that so far until today remain isolated in their own little islands. So the NRENs do a great job of advertising their services within their own communities, but it's very hard to find out about each other's services. This is a little bit of a diagram for the architecture of the directory. The NRENs publish through the web their information to a collector engine that gathers all the information in an XML format that will allow us to store in an XML database and query and structure in a way that will make it useful for the Geo API and possibly even a simple query form on the web. There's a lot of procedure that goes into this to make it reliable. So first of all, we have to protect this published data. So there have to be some mechanisms installed for the security of the published data. And then the requirements for installing have to be minimal to make sure that all interested parties don't have an overhead in setting up a complex mechanism to integrate with their local VC services. And also we have to think hard about how to make this data be maintained to acceptable, up-to-date level and not grow stale. So aging of the data is very important to us, and we've taken this into account when designing our XML schema for gathering this information. And the validity of the data with special validators that will be distributed in this package for the NRENs to help them maintain. Then we come into support services for the VC administrators. Basically, this support service is not going to be open to the end user. We couldn't possibly deal with that much overhead. We're organizing and coordinating the use of central tools like a mailing list for VC administrators at the national level and possibly at the organizational level. So any big organization that has local VC admins would be able to participate in the mailing list, pose problems, and get expert advice from the national administrators of the services. A trouble ticketing system is going to be installed, and federated access through EduGain, that's going to be leveraged. Problems that are identified and well known to the community are going to be documented on a knowledge base, so that will be available to everybody, to end users as well. Troubleshooting procedures are going to be published, especially for those reporting the problem. The procedures for reporting a problem are going to be integrated with steps, follow through a specialized procedure for checking and finding out where the problem lies. Does it lie with the calling side, with the caller side, or something with the infrastructure in between? And then response by the target administrators is also going to be coordinated to make sure that the problems are not left unanswered for too long, as is the case many times. And the scope is obviously the international problems in VCs. Usually a country cannot call another country at all due to national gatekeeper problems, or I cannot reach an MCU that's situated in another country, and that may or may not be a device problem. But that's at the lowest level that we're willing to go down to, the infrastructure, gatekeeper, MCU. The website of the effort has just been announced. You can reach it. It has very basic material. It's educonf.org. It's listed at the end of the presentation as well. This is sample view. Okay. And one of the future directions that we're thinking of taking is deploying a central resource for providing managed and guaranteed access to VC services. We're probably not going to be able to do this within the framework of GN2, but this is something to discuss. And we're also going to deploy open gatekeeper services to those end users that are not supported by the local institutions for such services, both for the H323 and SIP protocol. Okay. This is an overall diagram of everything I talked about, of the services and the user groups. The staff of EduConf is going to have access to all of these tools on the first column. The NRN admins are going to have very similar tools available to them. Organizational admins are a little bit limited at this pilot phase by not having access to the trouble ticketing system, but this is something we'll consider for the future. And end users themselves are going to be enjoying the services of the knowledge base, the directory, the monitoring, and echo test services for local echo testing of their endpoints. I hope this gives you a good overview of the whole effort. Oops, that was back. And this is our roadmap. I have to stress it's a very young activity within the GN2 framework. We're striving hard to get our pilot phase up and running by the end of GN2, which is going to be in spring 2009. Okay, and this is the end of my talk. There's limited information available right now, as you can see. If you go to the website, it's mostly stuff I've talked about. It's just to make our presence known. As soon as services are up, like the monitoring service, which we all deem as something very important, which is going to be within summer of 08, the website is going to include live dynamic data that is going to start helping end users with the service. And as I said, this is really not a closed effort. We're striving hard to get all the interested NRENs in VC services to participate. And even if they can't work with us on the project, even if they just provide directory deployment information, would be very happy to work with you and share any ideas you may have or proposals for new functionality. We would love to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Dimitris. We're a bit over time. Maybe we have just time for one small question and leave the other questions for tonight. I think that's a good moment to discuss.
Yes, I'm afraid I will not be very nice to what we heard. I mean, from my personal experience has been abysmal. And my personal experience had to do nothing with networking, nothing with gatekeepers, nothing with MCUs, nothing with directories, nothing with security, nothing with domains, anything. It had to do with the abysmal performance of my end equipment that is a very low level, very low end, less than megabit per second interface. I get excellent picture, I get excellent connectivity to MCU, and I get abysmal performance in my audio and everything. I get all sorts of problems with conflicting audio and video drivers and all that stuff. And I happened to need desperately, not really networking what you call it, support. I need desperately to have a low-level manual telling me what to buy, how to tune it, and so forth. This is the kind of help desk that I need as a user.
Okay, that's perfectly understandable. This is definitely something that we wouldn't be able to do centrally for all the users in Europe. This is really the need for deploying support services at all the local NRENs is obviously very great. What we can help with, and is something that we're talking about perhaps within GN3, is to provide training for local VC administrators and good training material for the end users. But we couldn't possibly interact with the whole European community as a central service. That would have been impossible to handle under such a centralized project.
Okay, thank you again, Dimitris. Maybe giving him warm applause. Our last speaker for today is Katrien de Moor. Katrien obtained a master's degree in communication sciences at the University of Ghent. And she's currently a researcher at the Research Group for Media and ICT, affiliated also with the University of Ghent and the Flemish Interdisciplinary Institute for Broadband Technologies. Katrien will present us the concept of quality of experience and how it can be measured in a specific user context. She will bring us her presentation from a more from the perspective of social sciences, but we also have some of the engineers who worked on the project here in the room to answer your more technical questions after the presentation. Katrien?
Okay, thanks for the introduction. Since I'm the last speaker, I will try to keep it short. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So my talk is on quality of experience in a mobile media context. As Koen said, this work was done with a group of engineers from Ghent. So it's a highly interdisciplinary process. And I will start with highlighting the general research context in which we situate our work. As we all know, the ICT environment has gone through a lot of changes. It has undergone a lot of evolutions and trends. And all of these trends have affected research, policy making, and the context for the users at many levels. And all of these challenges have changed really the context in which user research takes place. So the concept of user experience, quality of experience, I will get back to that in a moment, is very prominent in this discussion in this field. From a more theoretical perspective, we see the theory of interactionism, which is very important here because what we try to do is unite or bring together the societal perspective and the more technical perspective. Another concept that is very relevant in this respect is the concept of user-driven innovation. This really emphasizes the trend or the evolution towards more bottom-up research, really building on what users want, what they need. I've put a number of examples here, such as the European Network of Living Labs, which was established. In Flanders, we have a large living lab setting in Hasselt, the capital of Limburg. And a lot of big companies have also jumped on this trend, which has been going on for quite some time, to involve the user in the process. When we talk about ICT development and innovation in ICTs, we should also talk about failing innovations, and the reasons for failing innovations can be brought back to this figure, an innovation spiral. Since all of the companies bring more and more innovations to the market, there is an overload for the consumer, and he has to choose one. But given the accelerating speed of innovation development, a lot of stadia in the process need to be skipped. And unfortunately, usually this is the extensive phase of user research that is being skipped. So companies are now put in front of the challenge to find new ways to differentiate themselves from the competitors, from other suppliers. And on the other hand, the user, we've heard it in the talk before the break, the user has really gotten stronger. We talk of user empowerment. User has the choice of many suppliers. He can choose between many alternatives. As an example of this increasing importance of user experience, not only the user, but also the experience of the user, I've put this example of Philips. Philips brought out a very innovative flat TV called Aurea, and which uses Ambilight technology and really offers an experience to the user. And they want to make watching TV something more emotional instead of the current viewing practices. Now, interestingly, this campaign was launched with a budget of 50 million euro. And when you go to the website of the TV, there is almost no specification on technical details, etc. It was really created to highlight the experience factor. For example, they also hired director Wong Kar-wai to produce a small film to really get the user to experience what this TV could be like. So, what can we say? The consumer has become king over the last few years, and what he really needs is a good experience when he purchases a device or when he uses a service. He wants to be assured of a good quality of experience. So we can say that it has really become a very important determinant for the success of a technology or application. And along with this, this tendency towards involving the user and emphasizing the experience, this really found its way into new product development processes. And as the quote here says, more and more companies have understood that this is how it should be done. These are a number of examples. Philips, for example, created a panel of lead users, and these were involved in research on sleep quality and sleeping experience. You may all know this product, which was brought to the market a few months ago, the Philips Wake Up Light. This was one of the results from the Lead User NL initiative. We see that other big companies, such as Nintendo with its Wii, build on this wave of experience products. Nokia, Google, Alcatel, you name it. So maybe we can even speak about an era of user experience technology. However, there is still an important question entailed in this whole debate. That is, how can we ensure that the user will have a good experience at the end? What can we say? What has been done already? In various disciplines, researchers have tried to study this concept and to come up with ways to measure it, to make sure that users will have a good experience. But these efforts were all very fragmented. On the other hand, we seem to be confronted with a sort of clash of visions. On the one hand, we have a lot of technical people, engineers, and then on the other hand, my perspective, the more social science perspective, the perspective that really starts from the user. So this is a problem. In the example of the Philips Aurea, this is a quote I found in one of the articles. The technical people in Philips were really, they didn't agree with the fact that no technical information was communicated, but the marketeers and the people behind it, they wanted the experience and the emotion to speak for itself. So this clash of visions can, in most cases, be brought back to this. On the one hand, you have people that believe that you need to get insight in what the user wants, what he dreams, what he expects, what he feels. And this also relates to the concept I mentioned before, the user-driven innovation. On the other hand, we have a group of people that usually have a technical background, and they believe that optimizing quality of experience or creating a good experience can be reached by optimizing the quality of service. So this is quite a problem. Now, does quality of service equal quality of experience and vice versa? We believe it doesn't. As social scientists, we see this relationship between quality of experience and quality of service as follows. You need a good technical basis to build on, but on the other hand, it isn't always sufficient to have a good quality of service to ensure a good user experience. There are various examples to illustrate this. Think about Skype, which we probably all use. There is some kind of trade-off going on. As a user, you accept a bad quality at a technical level sometimes. On the other hand, you don't have to pay. It's free. You can communicate with people all around the world. Take the example of the iPod, which is so popular. For the iPod, the usability and the design of the look and feel of the device is very important. So what we did in our research, we studied this concept of quality of experience more profoundly. Not only we did an overview, we made an overview of the literature, we also consulted a panel of experts on quality of experience, both national and international. And we wanted to try to build a more comprehensive model of quality of experience, given this the fragmented pieces that were there before. So we came up with a model with 5 building blocks. I will shortly go through all of them. The first one is what we call quality of effectiveness. This really relates to what we all know as quality of service, the more technical parameters at various levels. But secondly, we also identified a building block called quality of efficiency, and that's really the counterpart of the first one, and it comes down to asking yourself the question, is this really what the user wants? does it work well enough for him? It may work well enough at a technical level, but does it work well enough for the user? So that's the second one. Of course, third one is usability, which is usually taken into account in the development of every project and every product. Sorry. And then something that is often forgotten are expectations. They come before the whole process starts. The user might think, oh, that's what I need, that's what I expect. And then the product is launched, and then in the end, there might not be a user experience gap because the product didn't live up to the expectations of the user. And then a last but very important building block is the context variable, which we divided up in several contexts. For example, an environmental context. Where do you use the device? Do you use it in a public environment, in a private environment? The personal and social context of the user. How does an application make the user feel? Does he feel comfortable using it? Then, for example, also the cultural context. What is the background of the user? What is the age group or the population we are dealing with? The technical context can deal with dimensions such as the price of the service, the price of the device. And then, these are all dimensions that can influence the way the user perceives or experience a technology or a device. So we came to this general model. There are more than 80 subdimensions, but for those who are interested, I would refer you to our paper. Just a small example of how we revealed some relevant dimensions for in a study of the PlayStation 3. Interestingly, in the sessions with hardcore gamers, when they were asked to tell me about what is important for you to have a good experience, the context variables were the first ones that were mentioned. For example, the community aspect is very important, the gameplay aspect is very important, the price is very important, etc. Okay, now with this in mind, let's come back to the question, how should we measure quality of experience, or at least how can we deliver a high quality of experience? Traditionally, the user research or the involvement of users within this whole process are situated in those two phases. So you have the traditional satisfaction questionnaires when a device or a service has been launched. In most cases, you also have some research in the second phase. So just before the thing is put into the market, you have user testings on prototypes, on demos, etc., usability testings, etc. But what is all often lacking is research into this particular kind of information. What does the user expect? And this study should come at the beginning of the process. So what we have done with the technical people from WICA, we tried to develop some kind of methodology that aims to bring together both perspectives, both the quality of service perspective and the user perspective. And it's a methodology in 5 steps. I will go to an example in a minute. First, we have a pre-usage phase in which the user is being questioned both by means of qualitative and quantitative methods. Secondly, there is a pre-usage translation workshop. What do we mean by this? In a lot of projects, there is a phase of user research, and then developers start their thing. They start building solutions, building services, etc. But the information is rarely passed on from the one group to the other group. And this is what we wanted to do with this methodology. A third phase includes the monitoring of an application, for example, during usage. So during when the user tests the application. And then afterwards, a fourth step, we gave the users, the test users, a small questionnaire on the device. And then lastly, the fifth phase is a post-usage comparison of the expectations and the actual perceived experience. And the aim there is to see whether there are experience gaps, whether there are areas in which the user was actually not very satisfied and where more work should go into the optimization of the service that is offered. So very short, a few words on a small case study we did with two iCity applications. As I said, iCity is the living lab of Hasselt. And we did a small test with 10 people in a more controlled setting. And we used two iCity applications. Building on this interactionism idea, we conducted this research in an interdisciplinary team. And our focus was really on how can we bridge this gap between both perspectives and create more meaning in the end. Okay. Just a few results. The first phase was a combination of a lot of methods. And that was taken care of by the social scientists involved. And our aim was to detect the relevant dimensions, the relevant QoE dimensions for the users. For example, things that came out was price was very important, the speed was very important, the display size. Interestingly, these dimensions, they vary for the different test users, which makes us even more sure that this should be taken into account at a personal level. Then the pre-usage translation workshops, what we did here was the technical people, they developed, for example, a small application that simulated download speed as a means to make it more concrete for the test users to understand or to explicitate what they want. The third phase was the phase of the monitoring. So every user was invited to test on a PDA device the applications. And they also got a number of usage scenarios, tasks they had to fulfill. But the thing here was that the parameter of signal strength was not only monitored, it was also variated. Okay. So what can we see then in the fourth phase? The users got the set of questions on the device. These were questions asking them about, were you satisfied? Did this application met your expectations? Did you feel frustrated during the usage of the device? And when we take a look at two graphs here from one of the test users, this shows that in the first one, the left graph, it shows the satisfaction of the users in function of the signal strength. What do we see? The first two are the scenarios, or the places with the best reception quality, and the last two, they had the worst reception quality, and the users indicated that they felt less satisfied in those two last scenarios. On the other hand, the other graph, we see something else. The two scenarios with the worst signal strength, the users really showed that they felt frustrated because the network didn't perform well enough, etc. And then we also try to make a comparison of these expectations ex ante and the experience after using the device. And we also noticed that, as we expected, for example, the availability of the network and the response time at the application level, the users felt dissatisfied. They had a bad quality of experience. So we can say there was an experience gap. And this might be very relevant information if you do this on a larger scale for developers in the process of optimizing a service or an application. So this was only a very small test, but we hope to have shown you how more technical parameters can be related to the really user-centric parameters. So just to conclude, our aim was to come up with a more integrated approach for quality of experience measurement. And we tried to take into account both objective measures, objective parameters, and more subjective user-related parameters. However, we still have a lot of work to do, and future research will include the testing of this methodology in a large-scale setting with 4,000 test users, and also to try it out with different usage contexts. And then the probe model, which is more the domain of my technical colleague here. It could be interesting to see what happens when you bring in more parameters to monitor. For example, more contextual information based on GPS locations, etc. More user-generated information. For example, the user lets you know, I am here at the moment, I need this. What can you do for me in order to make my experience better? Information about the activities of the user, so you can make sure that there are more targeted and personalized applications. It's just an idea. Or information about the mood of the user. So, and another way in which the methodology will be broadened in the future is by means of introducing personalized sets of questions on the device. So when the user has indicated in the first phase, okay, these are relevant dimensions for me, he should only get questions on these domains in the end. That was it. Thank you for your attention. You can always contact us, and if there are any questions, we are happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Katrien. Somebody has a question? Maybe I have one. As user, the interest of making services, products with good user experience is increasing every year, and we see also that, also for companies, but also for organizations like us, research networks, we see that it has become very important. But in your opinion, what you think still needs to be changed to come to good user experience? What are the aspects, the most important aspects to do so?
I think one of the most important aspects is that the user should be involved in the process throughout a continuous process. If you receive this feedback for the user, it will, throughout the whole process, you have a better chance at achieving success in the end. And then secondly, it has to do with methodological renewal. It has to do with going away from the traditional research methods, but also try to find ways to grasp that information from the user that is not very easy to get insight to, and that can be a base for product development in the future. So a user perspective throughout the whole process, but also from the beginning, from the expectations phase. For example, let designers work with users, which they already do in many cases. But and then I think lastly also what we found from our literature review is that user experience, it has so many names and it has so many definitions. But I think it's very important to keep in mind that a user, when you experience something as a user, there are many, many dimensions that can determine your experience. So they should maybe, it would be wise to take a look at quality of experience or user experience or whatever you want to call it from a very broad perspective, looking at society, looking at what people do in their daily lives, how they use technology in their daily life, and really use a more broad model such as the one we came up with, instead of only focusing on technical things.
Sorry, could I just ask one question? I got the impression that your methodology applies to new products, entirely new products. Although, manufacturers would market something as new, even though it's only a revision of a generic product, like the Philips TV. So, I mean, a lot of stuff we're getting now is just they are generic products. They're very interesting and so on, but they are not unique. There's a whole range of them. So, I mean, have you anything to say to consumers about, how they should rate these products? Because, we're told that this is unique. There is nothing to compare to it. Where there is, there is a big option space there when it comes to devices like this, and maybe that's where we should start.
Yeah. I agree, and I would say the methodology can also be applied to applications or products that are already on the market, but that, for example, in the context of the iCity Living Lab, we tested an application that was already on the market within the Living Lab setting, but it wasn't perceived very well by the user. And then when you can research this application at this level, you can find out what is wrong. Is it really something that doesn't interest them? Or are there things missing? Or where can we work on? And that's exactly the point you say. And then when it comes to unique products and things like that, there are always marches, or how should I say, bright ideas that just come out. But on the other hand, I think when you, what we, for example, did within one of the projects, we held a brainstorm with users at the very beginning of the process, and that just delivered we came up with so much relevant and new ideas from the users, so very bottom up. And I think that maybe when you try to involve them from the very first start, you might come up with some ideas that the industry players didn't think of before.
I don't have a question, but I have a small story to illustrate what you just said. We had I tried to find out how consumers looked at air companies in Norway, and they found out that the travelers were most satisfied with Ryanair. Of course, they had the worst service, but nobody expected anything from them, and of course they had the lowest price.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it shows what I said before. There are so many, think of YouTube, think of MySpace. There are a lot of examples which show that the dimensions that trigger users to use a service or an application are not always what was expected before. There can be other aspects playing, such as community, feeling, etc. And I think Ryanair is also a very good example here.
Okay. Again, thank you very much, Katrien. I think this was a very interesting presentation to conclude our session here. It leaves me with saying, hope to see you all tonight for a splendid evening at the Belfry in Bruges. Thank you. Bye.